Have you ever asked yourself why the people you love always seem to leave? Not once, not twice, but over and over again. It's like a pattern you can't break, a loop you never meant to create. They enter your life, they bring warmth, connection, even a sense of belonging. And just when you start to feel safe, they disappear. Sometimes it's gradual, a drifting you can't quite stop. Sometimes it's sudden, a silence that hits you like cold wind at midnight. One day they're there, the next they're just gone. You go back through every word, every moment. You search for clues. What did I miss? What did I do wrong? Where did I fail? And that's the part that hurts the most, not the absence itself, but the story you start to write in your head. A story that says, maybe I'm the problem. A story that whispers, it always ends like this, because something in me must be broken. There's a loneliness in that kind of loss that few talk about. It's not just about being alone. It's about feeling like no one ever stays, like no one ever sees you fully, like no matter how much you give, it's never enough to make them stay. And so you start to shrink, you start to doubt your worth. You become quieter in conversations, softer in love, and eventually you convince yourself that maybe loving less will hurt less. But what if I told you? It's not because you're unlovable. It's not because you're too much, or too little, or too anything. What if this isn't a punishment? What if this is a transition? Carl Jung once said, everything that we deny in ourselves, we project onto others, and everything we do not face returns as fate. So, what if the losses you've experienced, the people you've watched walk away, aren't the problem? What if they are the mirror? What if they were never meant to stay? Not because you failed, but because they were only meant to reveal something hidden, something sacred. What if this pattern is the soul's way of creating space, not for more pain, but for more truth? Because there comes a point on the path of growth where your energy no longer matches the old dynamics, where your frequency shifts, and those who used to feel like home suddenly feel unfamiliar, where you begin to see clearly what you once tolerated in the name of love. And when that happens, the universe doesn't ask for your permission to clean house. It just starts pulling threads. It unravels what was never meant to last. It removes those who no longer serve your becoming. And yes, it feels brutal. Yes, it feels like rejection. But maybe, just maybe, it's realignment. Maybe the losses are not evidence of your failure, but proof of your evolution. Think about it. What if these departures aren't breaking you? What if they're setting you free? Not everyone is meant to walk with you forever. Some are there to awaken you. Some are there to test you. Some are there to reflect the parts of you that still needed healing. And once they've served their purpose, the chapter ends. You didn't fail. You finished. Let that sink in. You didn't lose them. You outgrew them. And that though it hurts is sacred, because when you begin to choose yourself, deeply and unapologetically, you no longer cling to what is misaligned. You stop begging for crumbs. You stop shrinking to fit into spaces that don't recognize your value. You stop making excuses for people who never had the capacity to hold your heart. And yes, that choice comes with a cost. You will lose people, but you will find yourself. So maybe the real question isn't, why do they leave? Maybe the real question is, what part of me is finally being reclaimed? This isn't abandonment. This is resurrection. This isn't punishment. This is preparation. And maybe, just maybe, the people who are leaving are simply making room for someone or something that doesn't just arrive, but stays, not because you begged for it, but because your soul is finally ready to receive it. Loss doesn't always mean something went wrong. In fact, sometimes it means something is finally going right. When you begin to awaken, when you start coming home to yourself in a way that feels irreversible, the people who no longer resonate with your soul begin to fall away. Not always with drama, not always with closure, often just with distance, a quiet fading. And it hurts, because you remember who they were to you, how much you needed them once, how deeply you laughed together, cried together, dreamed together. But memory and destiny are not the same. What once held meaning doesn't always hold alignment, and that's what makes this journey hard. You're not just losing people. You're shedding versions of yourself. You're watching the scaffolding of your old life collapse, one attachment at a time. And that collapse feels like heartbreak. But if you look closer, you'll see the pattern. The ones you lost were not random. They left at the exact moment your soul outgrew them. That isn't coincidence. That's design. Carl Jung called this individuation the process of becoming truly yourself. The unraveling of false identities, the peeling away of layers that never really belong to you, and the return to something ancient, sacred, and unmistakably yours. But here's the part most people won't tell you. Individuation demands loss. It asks for the removal of anything that stands between you and your truth. And it doesn't wait for you to be ready. It moves on its own timing. So while you're mourning the people who left, your soul might be celebrating. Because the very connections you're grieving might have been the same ones keeping you stuck. You see, not everyone is meant to make the full journey with you. Some people are only meant for a season, a chapter, a paragraph, a single sentence in your story. They enter your life when you're still asleep to who you are, when your boundaries are blurry, when your self-worth is conditional, when your energy is still wrapped around proving your value through other people's validation. And then something shifts. You start honoring your intuition. You speak more truth. You stop settling. You say no to what used to drain you. And slowly, without trying, they disappear. Why? Because they're no longer vibrating at your frequency. It's not personal, it's energetic. You didn't push them away. You just stopped shrinking to make them comfortable. You stopped betraying your needs. You stopped abandoning yourself to stay lovable. And the truth is, they were never really walking beside you. They were walking with the version of you who still played small. And now that you're growing, they're just not compatible with the next version of your becoming. That's not betrayal. That's spiritual realignment. Loss, in this context, is not chaos. It's a clearing, a divine unraveling of the cords you were too afraid to cut yourself. Because let's be honest, you saw the signs long before they left. You felt the conversations grow hollow. You sensed the misalignment in your body. You noticed how much you had to overextend just to keep things peaceful. But you stayed. Because leaving felt like abandonment. Because you didn't want to be the one to give up. Because a part of you still believed that love means holding uneven when it hurts. But the soul doesn't cling. The soul releases. Not out of anger. Not out of bitterness. But out of truth. And truth says, this connection has served its purpose. Truth says, this cycle has reached its end. Truth says, it's time. And yes, it will ache. Yes, it will feel like something sacred was taken from you. But months from now, maybe even years, you'll look back and realize it wasn't taken. It was returned, back to the earth, back to the silence, back to the part of you that no longer needs it. That's how the soul works. It doesn't just add, it subtracts. It prunes what no longer bears fruit. It makes space for relationships that don't require performance. For love that doesn't come with conditions. For presence that doesn't feel like a negotiation. You may have lost people, but you didn't lose yourself. In fact, this might be the first time you've actually met yourself. And isn't that the point? To come home to the version of you who doesn't chase connection but becomes it. To embody love so deeply that anyone not rooted in the same depth will feel uncomfortable around you and leave. Let them. That's not a loss. That's alignment. You don't need to hate them. You don't need to explain your evolution. You don't even need closure. Because when a relationship ends for soul-level reasons, it ends cleanly, quietly, with no explosion, just an echo. That echo is your freedom. So here's the truth no one ever taught you. You don't lose people. You lose illusions. You lose masks. You lose coping mechanisms. You lose the scaffolding that kept you small. And every time something or someone leaves your life without warning, it's not the universe being cruel. It's the universe removing the weight you were never meant to carry into the next chapter. So the next time someone disappears, pause. Breathe. Remember this. Your soul is not losing people. It is preparing the room. It is creating space. And that space is holy. It feels like abandonment, doesn't it? People you once held close, friends, lovers, even family, start to fall away. They stop calling. They stop showing up. They pull back with no warning, no explanation. You look around and realize you're standing alone in a space that used to be full, and the silence feels heavy, like rejection, like being forgotten. But what if you're not being left behind? What if you're being refined? What if this isn't rejection, but purification? This is what no one tells you about transformation. It starts with collapse. The structures that once defined your life begin to crack. The relationships that once felt comforting no longer feel aligned. The roles you played, the fixer, the pleaser, the silent one, they begin to feel foreign. And the people who benefited from those roles, they begin to drift. Not because you changed in a bad way, but because you no longer fit the version of you they were attached to. You're not broken. You're becoming. Your soul is shifting frequencies. And when your frequency changes, your reality must change with it. What used to feel like love may now feel like control. What used to feel like home may now feel like a cage. That's not dysfunction. That's awakening. Carl Jung wrote deeply about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we repress, deny, avoid, the pain, the fear, the truth. Most people spend their entire lives avoiding this shadow. They perform, they pretend, they project. But eventually, some of us reach a point where we can no longer hide from who we are. And the moment you stop hiding is the moment everything begins to shake. Because you no longer make people feel safe in their delusion. You no longer participate in dynamics that feed false versions of you. You start speaking differently. You start honoring boundaries. You stop apologizing for your clarity. And that makes people uncomfortable. You become the mirror. And not everyone is ready to see their reflection. So they back away. Not because you're wrong, but because they're not ready to meet themselves yet. And standing next to you, someone who is doing the inner work, becomes unbearable. Let that land. They're not leaving you. They're leaving the space that no longer hides their shadow. You didn't push them away. You simply stopped dimming your light. And yes, it hurts. Because we want to believe that love can hold through anything. But not all love is ready for the truth. Some love survives only in comfort, in silence, in your compliance. But you've changed. Your nervous system no longer tolerates the noise of inauthenticity. Your energy no longer aligns with chaos disguised as connection. You feel it, don't you? The tension in rooms you used to enjoy. The disconnection in conversations that once felt easy. You've outgrown the patterns. You vibrate differently now. You're not being discarded. You're being recalibrated. The soul has its own rhythm, its own language. And when the soul grows, it demands congruence. It demands that your external world match your internal truth. And anything that doesn't, it has to go. That's why this feels like loss. Because it is. But not loss of love. Loss of illusion. Loss of dependency. Loss of roles you were never meant to carry forever. It's the shedding of false skin. And in that shedding, there is grief. There's no bypassing that. You will miss the familiarity. You will question yourself. You will long for what was, even if it was never right. But please hear this. Your loneliness is not proof that you did something wrong. Your loneliness is a symptom of expansion. When you awaken to your depth, you become harder to manipulate, harder to use, harder to control. And that makes you unappealing to anyone who benefited from your lack of boundaries. You stop being convenient, and you start being real. So they leave. Not out of hatred, but out of misalignment. That's what spiritual evolution looks like. Not everyone celebrates your growth. Some only stay if you stay small. And the moment you stop shrinking, the room gets quiet. Don't let that quiet scare you. Let it confirm you. You are not being abandoned. You are being revealed. The shedding is sacred. The loss is necessary. You're not the same anymore. You've cracked open. You've started asking better questions. You've stopped settling for shallow validation. You've tasted the truth, and now nothing false satisfies you. That's why they left. Because you no longer pretend. You no longer perform. You no longer stay silent just to keep the peace. You are becoming impossible to condition, unwilling to betray yourself, unavailable for anything that asks you to abandon your essence. And yes, it gets lonely here, because very few walk this path. But here's the promise. The ones who remain, the ones who meet you here, will not require you to dim. They will honor your truth. They will expand beside you, and they will stay, not because they need you silent, but because your authenticity calls them deeper into their own. So take this season of solitude as confirmation. You are not being cast aside. You are being carved. This is refinement, not rejection. You are not a victim of loss. You are the embodiment of evolution. Your soul is not empty. It is just shedding the weight. Because what's coming, it's too sacred to share space with what no longer serves you. There comes a moment in life when the external noise fades. The chasing, the pleasing, the constant reaching for something or someone outside of you begins to feel hollow. And in that quiet, something ancient awakens. Carl Jung called it individuation. The process of becoming who you truly are, beneath all the roles, expectations, and conditioning. It is not a destination. It is a sacred unraveling. A stripping away of everything that was never really yours to begin with. This path begins when you stop trying to fit in and start asking deeper questions. Why am I still trying to be liked? Why does their approval feel like oxygen? Why am I exhausted from performing a self that doesn't even feel real? These are not soft questions. They cut deep. They challenge the architecture of your life, the relationships you've built, the compromises you've made, the person you've become, in order to be accepted. Individuation demands that you step away from the crowd not out of arrogance, but out of necessity. It's the moment you stop living for applause and start living for alignment. It's the moment your inner world becomes more real than the outer world. And when that shift begins, people leave, not out of malice, but because your evolution makes them uncomfortable. You're no longer emotionally dependent. You're no longer the one who bends to make others feel better. You no longer exist inside the loop of give to be loved, help to be needed, sacrifice to be seen. And for those who knew you in your old form, this transformation is disorienting. They don't know where they stand with you anymore, because now you don't need them. And that changes everything. You see, when you begin to honor your soul, you break the silent contract you once had with those around you. The unspoken agreement that you would stay small so they could stay comfortable, that you would keep playing the part they liked, that you would avoid the hard truths to protect their image of you. But individuation tears up those contracts, because real truth is not negotiable. And in this stage of your life, you're no longer available for roles that ask you to abandon yourself. You're no longer willing to play the empath who absorbs everything, the savior who fixes everyone, the mirror who reflects what others want to see. You've stepped out of the script, and that liberation, it costs you. People you thought would be by your side forever begin to fade. They don't call. They don't ask how you are. They don't reach out the way they used to. And it stings until you remember that their place in your life was built on a version of you that no longer exists. You didn't lose them. You outgrew the illusion that you needed them to feel whole. That's the paradox of individuation. You begin by thinking you're losing everything, but in the end, you discover that you've finally come home. Home to your inner voice. Home to your quiet strength. Home to the version of you that never needed to be edited or explained. This doesn't mean you'll be alone forever. Quite the opposite. You will be met deeply, meaningfully, but only by those who recognize the frequency of self-possession. Only by those who aren't threatened by your wholeness. Only by those who don't need you to shrink in order to connect. Because now you're not looking for someone to complete you. You're looking for someone who can meet you fully. Carl Jung once said, "Those who look outside dream. Those who look inside awaken." And awakening is not always beautiful at first. It is raw. It is dismantling. It is saying goodbye to what once defined you. It is realizing that not every departure is a woundsome or initiations. Every person who left gave you a gift. They revealed what you no longer needed. They showed you the part of yourself still attached to external love, to borrowed worth, to conditional belonging. And now, here you are, no longer chasing, no longer settling, no longer waiting for someone else to give you permission to be whole. You are stepping into a new season, one where you do not live for anyone. You live aligned with those who can meet you in your truth. You no longer seek to belong everywhere. You choose where you belong. You no longer fear being misunderstood. You value being known. You no longer trade authenticity for acceptance. Because finally, your inner self has become your home. And for the first time, that home feels safe. That home feels like freedom. Losing people is not a sign that you're breaking down. It's a sign that you're becoming someone new. Let that truth settle in your chest. You're not falling apart. You're shedding what no longer belongs. You're not being abandoned. You're being chosen by your own soul, by your future, by the version of you that refuses to live halfway anymore. And if you're walking through this, now through the grief, the silence, the letting go, know this: you are not alone. This path may feel isolating at times, but it's shared by many, quietly, courageously. And you've just taken another step on it, simply by listening, simply by staying. So keep going, keep choosing yourself, keep walking even if the road is unfamiliar, even if it gets quiet, even if it feels like no one understands. Because at the end of this path is you, the real you. And that version of you deserves to be seen, not through the eyes of someone else's judgment, but through the clarity of your own heart. If this message speaks to something inside you, stay close. Subscribe to the channel, not just for content, but for connection, for community, for the reminder that this work, this healing, this becoming, doesn't have to happen in silence. Here, you don't have to explain yourself. Here, you are not too much. You are simply coming home. So take a breath. And remember, you are not losing people. You are finding yourself.